Hey students, so we are going to talk today about the first quarter book report. Now, I want you all to be reading on your own. I told you before, it doesn't really matter what you're reading as long as it's something that you enjoy reading. And this first book report is going to have a little bit less more formal directions. You can basically choose any book that's at your reading level. I would aim for maybe about 100 pages for that book, and then you're going to make this presentation. So I'm going to kind of go through and do an easy example for you so that you know what you're doing. And then this is just going to be due at the end of the quarter. So I think maybe the day or two before the quarter ends, just to make sure that you're getting that completed. So you have enough time to read it, and then you can complete it as you go and turn it in at the end. So the very first slide here says your book title and your author and who was presented by. Well, I'm going to type in here, my book title is going to be Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood. And my author, if you don't know who the author is because you're reading it online or you're listening to an audiobook and you can't quite find it, all you have to do is go to Google and then figure out who your author is. I can see my author is Charles Perrault. I don't like the word author in there, so I know that's the author. And then it's presented by, that's myself. And then perfect, my first slide is already done. Moving on to the next slide. It says, hello, I'm going to speak to you today about blank. If you look down here in the bottom, it'll have some guidelines, some instructions for you on how to fill out that slide. So this one says, write the name and title of your book, or write your name and the title of the book. So I'm going to say, hello, I am Miss Hoovie, period. I'm going to speak to you today about Little Red Riding Hood. Perfect. If you want to add a little bit more spice in there, you can, but that's good for that slide. My next slide is the genre. The genre is going to be like realistic fiction, historical fiction, fiction, nonfiction, mystery, fairy tale, tall tale, things like that. So the genre of my book is actually, it's a fairy tale. So I might say my book is a fairy tale. And then you need to make sure you explain why, because there are made up characters that could not all be realistic. There's a talking wolf, obviously, so they can't be realistic. And the directions down here say the genre of your book and how do you know it's a genre. So, for example, if it's a realistic fiction, that means that the events could happen, but they didn't necessarily happen. So I just explained in one sentence what my genre was. That slide is then completed. Scroll down to the next one. The setting description. Setting is always your time and your place. And down here in the directions, it says, please include both of those with explaining a minimum of 3 sentences. And you also get to put in your own picture. So you want to delete this. So I'm just going to click on it and then click backspace and it deletes. I want a picture of where my story happened. So actually, Little Red Riding Hood happened in Italy, but we're going to be more specific and do a forest because we know she went through the forest to her grandmother's house. So I'm just going to insert an image, search the web. I'm going to type in transparent forest. Transparent just means that it's going to be able to be on the background and not have all the extra space. So you can scroll down and see which one do you like. I think maybe this one would be good for me. You can drag and drop it or click it and insert it. Perfect. So I'm going to start typing here. This story takes place in the woods or forest where the main character is walking to her grandmother's house. She has to get to the house through the forest where she meets the wolf, the big bad wolf. And then you can say one more thing about the setting as well. So time and place. We know that it's in the forest. Our time could be, it kind of happens during the day, maybe a little bit towards the night by the time she actually gets to her grandmother's house. But we want to make sure we include that in there. So the time of day was, I would say, early evening when the events occurred. If you also wanted to talk about maybe time of day or time of year, so maybe it's in the fall or maybe it's in summer, something like that, you can totally do that as well. So then we're just going to go ahead and scroll on down to the next slide. Important characters. It says type over each number to write the names of the important characters in the book. So our first character is Little Red Riding Hood. Our second main character is going to be, we'll say, Big Bad Wolf. And then our third character, who doesn't really say much or do much, is going to be Grandma. Perfect. That slide is done. If you have 6 characters, you can add in more. If you have 2, 3, 4, whatever, however many you have, just put their names in that little bubble. Now we're going to explain. So talk about the main character. I want you to, once again, use several sentences to explain who your character is. I might just say, Little Red Riding Hood is a young teenage girl who is going to her grandmother's house. She has to go through the forest to get there. She is bringing her grandmother some goodies. And then we also know, based upon how the story goes, that she talks to the wolf. So maybe she talks to a wolf while on her way to the cabin. And then I also might use a symbol or an image to represent my character. Now I think it's pretty obvious. I'm going to probably use a red jacket or something like that. So maybe I don't want something with a hood though, because it's a Little Red Riding Hood. Oh, I could do this one. So I think whenever you see this image, you kind of think of Little Red Riding Hood and how she goes through these different adventures into seeing her grandma. Perfect. Now my story sequence. For time's sake, I'm not going to completely write out all of what happens in the story, but you would aim for about 2 to 3 sentences per box. So maybe in the beginning, you talk about how she is going to the forest. And then in the middle, you can talk about the climax of the story. The climax of the story is when she's looking at Grandma. Grandma's now the wolf because Grandma's in the closet. And she says, what big eyes you have, what big teeth you have. And that's kind of when he pounces on her. That's going to be the climax. And then at the end, you could talk about how, Little Red Riding Hood survives, she's okay, and just kind of end it with how the story ends. I want to know how the story ends. Don't leave me on a cliffhanger. I actually want to know this time. So once again, 2 to 3 sentences per box. I would try for like the beginning of the story, the middle or the climax, and then the ending of the story. Slide number 8, the theme. Tell us about the theme. The theme is going to be the message the author wants you to take away from it. So the message isn't going to be there's no such thing as talking wolves. That's not the big takeaway. I would say the big takeaway is maybe don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to strangers. Or you could even say be cautious when talking to someone you do not know. And then I want to go ahead and explain it. So you will also try and shoot for maybe 4 to 5 sentences here explaining that theme. So I would type in here, Little Red encounters the wolf. She is cautious while talking to him, and that makes her a little bit on edge. When she gets to her grandmother's house, she notices some things aren't really right, and then it kind of takes on the rest of the story. If you want to connect it to your own life and talk about how that theme could connect to you and something you've been through, you can totally do that as well. All right, your favorite quote. This is probably going to be my favorite slide to look through because I want you to choose one quote, one sentence from the story that you feel like really stood out to you or that you just really liked. Now, with Little Red Riding Hood, it's a children's story. It's not really that long, so I might just put the sentence that talks about, she says, "What big teeth you have," because at that moment, the wolf then pounces on her, and we know that's the climax of the story. So you just go ahead and type that in there. If you want to include an image too that kind of relates to it, you can always do that. You don't have to. A recommendation. I would give this book 3.5 stars because, and then just go ahead and explain why. Because I really enjoyed the characters. However, I think that it was a little too scary for children. Whatever you want. Doesn't matter to me. Just make sure you give a number rating, so 1 through 5, and then explain why you gave that rating. And then finally, you have your thank you. So just thank you. I'm going to be grading this, but just thank the audience for going through your presentation. If you have like a mic drop worthy last statement you want to throw in there, you can do that well. So it could be something like, remember kids, don't talk to strangers, or I hope you enjoyed my presentation, etc., whatever you want. You don't have to, but make sure that you have some kind of ending slideshow here. These last two slides are just extra things for you so you can add in different emojis or icons throughout your presentation if you so want to. You don't have to. All you have to do is copy and paste it and drag it over. You can resize the object, make it bigger or smaller, change the colors, whatever you want. You do not have to do this. If you want to be extra creative, you can, but you do not have to. And that is the full book report for the first quarter. So once again, you should choose a book that is at your reading level, and which you got the reading level score from your student reading inventory that we did on August 24th. So use that as a general area of where you should be reading. Choose a book that maybe is about 100 pages minimum or more. Then you have the rest of this quarter to read it and make sure this presentation is completed by that due date, which I will look to see when the quarter ends, and I'll make it probably 2 days before the end of the quarter just so there's a buffer zone as well. If you have any questions, you can always email or comment on the post, and this will be available from now until the end of the quarter. Good luck and enjoy.